Hello, my name is Carol May Whittick, your creativity and spiritual life coach and your host of Her Conversations, Tools for the Awakening. Her is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. This is the optimal state to embody in order to attract our highest desires. What is the awakening? This is the moment in time when humanity rises up out of the darkness. Who is awakening? Each one of us present on earth today, reclaiming our sovereignty, seeking greater possibilities in our reality and looking for solutions. We know being awakened is not a lofty ideal but a necessity. If we can transform ourselves, we can change the world. Guests on Her Conversations will speak to your spirituality, sensuality and soul. Listen to their stories and hear how they are in service to the world. Let their words and these conversations embolden and inspire you. Before going into this week's episode with Courtney Moore, just want to share with you a date for your diary. First, mark your calendars for Wednesday, the 9th of October, which will be October's Creative Confidence Masterclass. In these monthly gatherings, I help you rediscover your creative abilities, explore spiritual practices to enhance your creativity, and also build a strong connection with your intuition. It's when you recognize yourself as a spiritual being, then you can confidently integrate creativity into all aspects of your life. And also, if you haven't already, do tune in to Higher Energetic Resonance Inspirations, which is the sister podcast to this title, where in each episode I explore with you a different aspect of our spiritual and creative journey. All of the links are in the show notes below. My guest this week is Courtney Moore, an intuitive healer trained in classical Chinese medicine. She has a clinic in San Francisco where she offers acupuncture, bodywork and Reiki, and also offers remote intuitive readings to clients around the world. Courtney has recently launched the Liberated Body, a 12-week course on excavating and releasing the energetic and emotional roots of pain in the body. During our conversation, Courtney shares about her 20 years of work in the healing arts. She also talks about the different ways we can approach and understand pain so that ultimately we can grow through it and reconnect with our true selves. So as always, I begin by asking my guest, Her is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. When do you feel that higher energetic resonance?
At the end of a yoga class. That's such a clear answer for me. And I had a teacher once who I asked him sort of like, should I keep practicing? Like, how do I know I'm getting something out of this? And he had such a simple answer. He said, well, how do you feel walking out the door? And I realized I just feel incredible. I feel so in my body and happy, but not in like a flat, happy way, like blissful. I feel blissful and joyful. And I really feel like that resonance has lifted in that practice. And hopefully it lasts for as long as it can after that.
Brilliant answer. Thank you so much. And before we go into the full conversation, I just want to give a few moments for you to introduce yourself and talk about the work that you do now and maybe even what got you to this point today.
Well, it's a long story of what got me here. I do healing work, and that can mean a lot of different things. I'm trained as a body worker and an acupuncturist and a clairvoyant. I've been on this path for about 20 years. I really love the archetype of the wounded healer. That really speaks to me. And I had a pretty difficult childhood. My mother died. My father was autistic. We moved twice a year. I ran away from home at 15. And I think all of that really set the stage for living a life where I was very aware of suffering and felt very called to attend to suffering in some way. My practice has evolved in such a way that I don't actually always want to take it away. I think sometimes our suffering has a lot to teach us, and it would be arrogant for me to decide if you get to learn that lesson or not. But I always want to acknowledge suffering and offer healing, peace, love in whatever way feels right.
So what shape does your work take at this moment in time, would you say?
It's sort of 3 different paths. I have 2 little clinics here in San Francisco where I do hands-on services. So that's either a half hour or a full hour. And it's usually acupuncture, sometimes some body work, some cupping. Sometimes I do some sort of intuitive reading or energy clearing during that process also. Yeah, hands-on work, number one. Number two, I do just full readings remotely. And so that can be psychic readings, tarot readings, coaching readings, different ways to interact with people remotely and guide them. And number three, I have this new program I launched, which is really for people who are in pain and curious about that spiritual connection. Like, what part of this is my emotional body or my spiritual body trying to give me information and messages that I am not receiving?
Mm.
And so that program, it's recorded modules. You get a few one-on-one sessions with me, but it's really to help people sort of explore and excavate the roots of pain. And that's number three. Those are my three big pillars right now.
Got it. Great. I really want to kind of lean into the third one, actually, what you're saying about pain. And I think when we spoke before, you were talking about decoding pain. And pain is so much of everything that we want to run away from. Nobody really wants to be in pain or then even think that pain has anything to show us or to teach us other than it's something we want to try and avoid. So how are you opening up the idea to people that pain is a message, that there's something there for us to be to be aware of and maybe go deeper into and welcome the appearance of pain?
Yeah, I think the person who's receptive to that message, if it's not already a part of sort of their lexicon of human behavior, the human condition, is the person who's tried to get rid of that pain in so many ways and it hasn't worked. So they've tried the painkillers and the icing, they've gone to doctors, they've thought about surgery, and their pain is just this persistent, it's almost like a lighthouse, it's just this constant ping of there is sensation in your body. And are you going to attend to it? There is sensation in your body. Are you going to attend to it? I think the person who's ready to be curious about that pain really doesn't want to go the route of numbing any longer. For
Mm.
whatever reason, they've learned it doesn't work. They resist drugs and surgery. They're afraid of side effects. There's something in their life that has taught them there's something here to explore. I just don't know enough about it, so I need to ask for help. And so for that person, I'm really eager to talk about, like, I start with what is energy? I really believe everything is energy. This table, this cup of tea, my body, your body, everything is energetic. There's dense forms of energy, there's more diffuse forms of energy, but pain is an energetic experience. In Chinese medicine, there's a very famous saying, where there is stagnation, there is pain. Where there is no stagnation, there is no pain. And so pain is this experience of energy not moving. There's a stuckness. And there's a lot of reasons it could be stuck. But once we acknowledge this energetic stuckness, then we put our curiosity hats on, right? Well, why is it stuck? What in my life am I deficient? The image there is like a river in the summer that's so dried up it can't even move along, right? It's just a trickle. That could be part of your pain. Maybe you need more nutrition. Maybe you need more of your own life force that you've cut yourself off from. Maybe it is just a stagnation from like a trauma, like you had a head injury years ago. Now you have these headaches. Well, we have to move that energy somehow. And then I introduced the concept of emotions as energy, because again, everything is energy, even thought forms are energy. And so if we think of emotions as a form of energy, a lot of times we don't want to feel that emotion. We don't want to feel the full grief, the full fear, the full sadness, even the full joy sometimes. And so if that emotion isn't felt, it stops. It's an energy that gets stuck. It's sort of cheesy, but I like the phrase, emotion is energy in motion. And if we don't feel it, it's like a little traffic jam in your own energetic system. And that might live in your hips, in your neck, in your shoulders. And so then we explore, well, what might this emotion be? Even if we don't know, most people know, I'll just say that, right? Most people have some inkling. Well, this is about like that big fight I had with my partner, or this is about the fact that I hate my job and every day I dread going into work. But if you have no idea, there's all these different maps of the energetic body from ancient civilizations, cultures that have been looking at energetic healing for much longer than Western medicine has been around. And so we can use those maps to get really curious about, well, what might this signal mean? Right shoulder pain, what might that mean energetically? And can I connect that to some kind of emotional experience that I've had? And then honestly, it's so much meditation. It's so much sitting with your body and with the pain and going towards it instead of running away from it and really allowing it to show you what it is, what it's trying to tell you.
Mhm. So bringing it to yourself, and when you were kind of learning about this and becoming more aware of the message in pain itself, what were some of the things that were awakened within you, and what were the things that you started to realize and be able to connect the dots and also receive as well in a way that was and for anyone going forward as well, to receive it in a way that is as information and empowering information, as opposed to sometimes pain can be taken on as almost like a mantle for suffering, as a way to kind of sit in victimhood and a way to blame. And and the thing is, if you have been through difficult things in your life, usually what you're going to get when you retell that story is people's pity. You're not going to get, it's going to be very rare that you say, I went through this, and people are going to go, well, amazing, good for you. You've just been given the best message. That's not the way that our minds are orientated towards pain. So what taught you, and then how can we kind of get into that, looking at the pain and seeing the message?
That is a phenomenal setup. Thank you for that cue. I have three responses to that I think are all really important. The first is that in my own journey, I really had to learn it in my own body. I think that's true for any healer, guide, teacher. We have to experience it so that we can hold the container for others. So for me, I had a injury in my upper right back. I fell down a flight of stairs in college. It was wet and I slipped. It was Valentine's Day. I was holding a package from my godmother, and I was walking to a class where I sat next to someone I had a huge crush on. It's my freshman year of college. So there's a lot there, right? There's a lot we can start to unpack if we wanted to look at it from a certain lens. But little 19-year-old Courtney was just in pain. I was a rower at the time. I did not want to stop rowing. And so I iced with the trainers. I got MRIs. I put topicals on. I once did a race. It was a very important race. I took 8 ibuprofen before the race because I was just like, I'm not going to let this pain stop me. And that's always what we think, right? I don't want the pain to stop me. I want to keep living my life. Well, that pain continued to plague me for like a decade. I had to stop running because it really hurt when I went running outside. And, things like yoga made it a little bit better, but I felt like it was always there. It was like my constant companion was this pain. And once I started getting more into healing work myself as an acupuncturist, and again, I tried every modality. I tried chiropractic, acupuncture, massages. Some of them made it worse. Like I was not getting relief. And then I really started thinking about some of those cues I just explained to you. And they're all about love in the heart, right? Valentine's Day, my godmother, who was like a mother to me, this person I had a crush on and didn't know how to deal with when I was, a young girl. And I really started healing my heart and listening to my heart and opening my heart. And then I started working with a very different caliber of practitioner who were more interested in the energetics. And I got a lot of energy work on this part of my body. And I cut cords and I prayed. And I had one session with this energy worker. It was miraculous. It's gone. I haven't felt that pain in 10 years since, because we finally got to it. I finally did the inner work and moved that stuck energy and got to the root. And I always believe, the saying, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. I think that's true for patients also. When the patient's ready, the healer appears. So I think I did all that inner work, and the right healer could finally step in and really permanently provide this relief, which I'm still astounded by that. So combining that experience that I had personally with what was happening simultaneously in my acupuncture practice was the big catalyst. And what that was I was seeing how much I was just a technician for so many of my patients. They would come to me with their headaches and their neck pain and their back pain, and I would do the needles that take away those pains, and they would feel great for a couple of weeks, maybe a month, and they'd come back. And after doing this enough times, and don't get me wrong, I think there's value in that. I think for some people, that is such a gift, just to have that momentary relief, have that burden lifted for a while. But what I noticed was I felt like I was enabling people. I felt like I was taking this pain away and then sending them right back into this scenario that created the pain. And so they were going to be stuck in this cycle of getting a little relief and then recreating that. It was especially apparent for me in, I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. People have so much shoulder pain. This is everywhere. But in the Bay Area, there's so many very ambitious, motivated, busy people. And that shoulder pain is so often just responsibility that is not yours that you are carrying. So, I remember working on a really high-powered attorney who, again, clearly hated her job and was taking on this very masculine role, even though she had a very feminine signature to her. And it was just all on her shoulders. And I would do my best to take it away, lift it off. But then she'd go again directly back into this life where she was just putting so much weight on her shoulders, on herself. And I didn't want to be a technician. I really wanted to figure out, how do I get this person to step out of that cycle? And that brings me to the third point, which I think you, again, queued up so nicely. And I don't have a perfect solution to this, but we really have to take full responsibility for our bodies and our lives. I think that's really hard for people. And I want to say that gently because I know that might be a really difficult journey for some people to step into. But the spiritual teacher I study with, it always harps on this concept that you are responsible for everything in your life. And she and I both really believe in reincarnation. So there's also this sense of a karmic ownership. We don't know what we did in past lives that created the bodies, the families, the mindset that we're coming into this life with. But it is all ours. And I think if you really wrap your head around that, it's actually an incredibly empowering point of view. You know what I mean? Because if it's all mine, that means I can change it. It is all in my hands to make different decisions and to, just make different choices. But I think for a lot of folks, I'll go back to my attorney with the shoulder pain. She doesn't want to think that she is continually choosing a lifestyle that creates an undue burden on herself. She wants to think of herself as this high-powered boss babe who is making a lot of money and has a lot of corporate success and is respected by her colleagues. And those things are at odds. That is going to be a journey for her to reconcile the way she is responsible for what's happening in her body. And if she were to truly take responsibility for it, she would have to make very difficult decisions and change her life in a way that in her current capacity, she doesn't want. And so all of that is to say, just to recap, I experienced it in my own body. I recognized I didn't want to be a technician. And then I started to see, if people are really going to heal, they have to take responsibility for their own emotions, their own energy, their own choices. And that really shifts my role in their life. It becomes less, again, about taking that pain away and more about leading people towards that pain and helping them see it as clearly as they can. And then, of course, people get to make their own decision, right? If this woman really sees that the way that she's putting this responsibility on herself and it's too heavy and it's not hers, but she is consciously saying, I don't care, I want to keep doing this. She totally gets to do that. That is her karma and her life and her body. And also, I know for a fact that pain will get worse and worse and worse until, maybe she needs surgery. Maybe she has to take a leave of absence because her body is screaming at her. Maybe she gets an autoimmune disease. That saying, life throws pebbles and then rocks and then boulders. She's probably at mid-sized rock stage, right?
Yeah.
But the boulders are coming if you don't make a different decision. And so part of my aim in trying to teach people about these energetic patterns is to avoid the boulder stage. The boulder stage can be like a terminal cancer diagnosis. There is a point when the energy is so condensed that it's too hard for us to reverse, right? And so understand yourself and your energy before you get to that point. That would be my strong recommendation to anyone listening.
Gosh, okay. There's so many ways I want to go with this, and I'm trying to be not fire three questions at you at the same time. It's a bad habit that I've got that you'd think after years of doing podcasting I'd learn, you ask one question at a time, but it just kind of throws up so much. The first thing that came to my mind was many years ago, I used to do a lot of working for a health company. We sold trinkets like massage tools and massage chairs and, supplements like turmeric and CBD and things like that. But I remember noticing a pattern, and me and my colleagues would always kind of comment on this pattern, that we would notice like a high number of women over a certain period of time. There seemed to be this real uptick in it, who were coming and speaking to us that they had fibromyalgia. And it seemed like there was this kind of shift from it being, and the thing is, I don't work in the medical field, so, you know, I can't see it from the inside out. I'm just kind of someone who's trying to provide a tool for people that might help them. That this seemed to be the thing, or the, I don't want to say trend, but it seemed to be the thing that the majority of women who were talking about issues were talking about, that it was, they had fibromyalgia. And it was almost as well as if they introduced themselves as that. They could pretty much almost say, this is my name is fibromyalgia. You know, and we were working, you know, in very busy environments where you rarely got to know anyone's name, because, you know, we're there selling, they're buying. Occasionally you'd kind of happen on a conversation, but that it led them, they would lead with this, it became their identity. And over the time, as you know, I started to really get to speak with some of the women, just as a point of view of like finding out from them, because a lot of the time they were just in so much pain, you know, they just didn't know where to go, what to do. But what I noticed, a kind of a pattern, was that they tended to be busy mums and stay-at-home mums for the most part as well, and that were looking after a household of kids. They'd usually have like 2 or 3 kids of around adolescent age, and a husband that was bringing in the money, and had gotten to a point over that decade and a half of bringing up these kids, and the husband going out and working, and they're just keeping everything going, where they became very invisible until they had this diagnosis. And then the diagnosis made them visible, because now that they weren't able to do as much, now that they had to get the kids to do things, or the husband to help out, and then that she had a reason then to sit this one out, to not be able to do all the things that she did, then her identity became attached with the diagnosis. And even though they wanted to be out of the pain, they didn't want to go back to that invisibility again, because they were now being seen. But it had got to that point. It's like, how would you speak to somebody who had found something that kind of gives them visibility, but then if that goes away, you know, if she gets well, then everyone's just going to expect her to go back to being the invisible one that's magically keeping the house clean, you know, food on the table, everything's working, but nobody sees her.
When you say that, I remember a patient I worked with who had fibromyalgia. She was an acupuncture patient, and her kidney pulses, which in Chinese medicine, the kidneys are this like deep source of source energy. Kidneys are very, very important in Chinese medicine. Her kidney pulses were like non-existent. There was nothing there. And what I came to was that this woman, who was a working mom with 2 kids, she was so cut off from her own life force. She was so disconnected from the energy that needed to be coming through her. And so I think in the example you're giving, that woman has to learn to create boundaries and tap into her own desires before she's willing to give up that title, that identity, because she has to have something to go back to that isn't that life, right? And there's a wisdom in that. There's a wisdom in her body saying, will you please remember who you are? And she has to do that work either before, sort of simultaneously, to the work of releasing that identity, which finally gives her freedom from the life that she didn't love. So I think, again, boundaries and desires are the 2 things I would really recommend someone like that lean into.
Yeah. And then it's because after a while, because I was just looking for a pattern, you know, it was like, why are we seeing this all the time? It just seems, and in speaking to them, it was like, isn't it strange, or isn't it coincidental that they almost have the similar family setup? They're always around about the same age. The kids are around about the same age. You know, they could almost be like identical, and just seeing that happening. And then after a while, just seeing, oh, okay, then now that's why you lead with that more than your name, because that's how you're getting seen by everybody because of that. How would you then broach that with somebody to say, oh, this pain's here to teach you? Because she's like, you think, you know, that would be where she would go, you know, after all, I don't want this. Do you really think that I would bring this on myself, manifest it within myself, that they I'd never bring it to anyone, but I was just noticing this pattern, but I knew it wouldn't be something that you could say. And I was not in any kind of way a medical practitioner or anyone in that. I was just a curious, like, why is this happening so much?
Yeah.
But then also in having that conversation, like you say, you kind of get an idea when you speak to people of how much they can receive in terms of like hard truth and high concepts.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I knew it wasn't the thing to go, do you think you might be manifesting? That would just not go down well at
That's
all.
right. That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah. It's such a good question. And it's a tricky line to walk. I think in that case, with that person, you have two potential paths. And I've observed these out in the world. One, there's a very famous medical intuitive named Carolyn Mace. You might know her. And she was interviewed. I wish I could find the reference, but she tells this story about at the end of a conference, this woman came up to her and like begged her for a reading. And Carolyn just like took one look at her, and Carolyn is a hard talker,
Yeah, that's why I
and
like her.
I like her so much. And she
Yeah.
is so willing to deliver those hard truths and then just let go. And
Mm.
so that's option one. And she told this woman, you're attached to your identity being part of this disease. You need to let that go. And then walked away, and just like dropped that hard truth bomb and did not care at all if that woman received it, if that woman continued to follow her. That's one option. It's very hard for me to do personally. It's something I'm honestly trying to get better at, because of my best teachers have told stories about how they delivered a hard truth. And a decade later, the person came back and said, you were absolutely right. It took me 10 years to hear you, but it was always in my mind. And thank you for planting that seed for me. So that's option one. Option two, I've been getting really into parts work. Are you familiar with like internal family systems? It's a really cool new sort of psychological approach. There's a great book on it called No Bad Parts. And that's the concept, is we have all these fragments of who we are inside of us, these parts, and none of them are bad. We don't want to excise them. We don't want to make them feel like they're a problem. We don't want to hide them. We want to let all these parts sit at the table and speak to us. And so in this example, these women have a part that's very identified to the victim. It's not their essence, right? It's not their soul, but they have this part that is clinging on to that identity. And so the more gentle approach would be just to do some parts work, get to know that part really well. And when you do parts work, you get to know a lot of the parts. There's a part of them that feels really sad that their husband doesn't give them as much attention. There's a part of them that's really proud of their children and the work they do. So we listen to all the parts, and we try to have a really curious conversation with the part that's creating the behavior we don't want, and figure out what that's rooted in, usually childhood, right? There's usually some sort of pattern from being very young that's creating these parts. And then figure out, can that part be given a different task in our internal psyche? Can the part that's clinging on to the wounded, diseased identity cling on to like a survivor phoenix identity? Can we shift that laterally somehow? So the part's still there, the part is still working, but we've moved its objective over. So I think those are the two ways for that. And I think in both situations, the practitioner, whoever is working with that person, has to maintain such a strong neutrality, because we all have our own journey and our own choice. And those people might choose, again, they might choose the mid-sized rocks for a while. They might have to get to boulder stage. And then in my belief system, they will be reincarnated and get another chance to work out this pattern until they get to the other side of it.
How does your psychic work play into the work that you do? How do you integrate that?
Not very well. I've wanted to integrate it better. And what's hard for me is that I'm so good in my hands-on work. I just have such an instinct for where to touch people and how. It's almost like I'm on autopilot, right? I just let my hands take me where I'm going, even with the needles. They know where to go. And I'm a very good psychic. And I did a lot of psychic school over Zoom during the pandemic. And I actually went to a psychic school. It's in a different state. So it was a lot of Zoom classes. And so I'm very good at that. But bridging them in the treatment room has proved to be really challenging for me. I'm still kind of figuring out, it feels almost like I have to put one skill on pause to do the other one. And so at this point, they're segmented. Like I said earlier, there's the hands-on work I offer, and there's the readings I offer. And what I will often tell people is, if we're doing hands-on work, I'll say you might want to schedule a reading with me so that we can explore what's going on in a deeper way. Sometimes I'm able to do both at the same time. It really is about the patient and their own willingness to co-create that session with me and sort of like play along. Um, I always thought I would be a medical intuitive. I thought I'd follow in the Carolyn Mace kind of footsteps. I have such a medical background and I have this intuitive ability. And my real gift is actually more around relationships. I read the people in the querent's life very well, and I read the energy of those relationships and how those energies are affecting the person really well. And I'm still sort of coming to terms with that. Carolyn May says she wanted to be a fiction writer. That was her ambition in life. She did not want to be a medical intuitive. And then, God dropped this gift on her, and she's like, okay, I guess this is my life path. And she still writes fiction on the side. She says it's not very good, but she loves it. And so I'm still thinking like, well, maybe this isn't my calling to do medical intuition. Maybe there's a different application of these gifts that is being queued up for me in some way.
Yeah, you can never be sure. But then who knows? I kind of like came out into the world going, I'm going to be a singer, songwriter, pop star, that kind of, that's where I really went for it for many, many years. But by doing all of that and following those things, I learned so many tools. Of course, I learned resilience because you're just going to get knocked down all the time, so that's really going to teach you a lot about yourself, the discipline of writing, the craft of writing, just really getting in touch with my own creativity, and also seeing the real connection between spirituality, because I've been on this kind of spiritual quest of dipping in and out of so many different modalities and groups and teachings, and then kind of bringing it all together, which is, I never thought I'd be doing this, but then it doesn't not make sense, so even though I had a very kind of clear and a way that I kind of doggedly pursued it for a very long time. But there came a point where it was like, okay, I've done as much as I can do at this point. And then I needed to take what kind of turned out to be like 5-6 years of just doing other things. But then within that time, learning how to work the internet, because I was like, how does this thing work? People are making money here. What's going on? So I spent a lot of time doing that. And then all of those skills then started to build into the podcast and everything else. And then it's all kind of coming back round. But like for my own journey, if I think one of the things that's very clear is kind of the energy that was behind why I wanted to really succeed at music started to be completely removed from doing music. It became very much about kind of proving people wrong, because I was just kind of going, it was very much ego led. And it will be when you're young, when you're younger, because so much, or for me anyway, so much of my validation came from that, because that was the thing that it was effortless. I was good at doing it. Even though in those days you were so gate kept on trying to get your voice out there and your music out there, and but it gave me so many different experiences that it couldn't have been any other way. And now coming back round and doing this work is like, oh, I can do it now, but there won't be any of that charge that was on it for so long. So I won't be going into it trying to make like how much money out of it, or I won't be going out there for it to be validation. It will be, as in the way with Caroline Mice, I'll do it without it having to be anything. I'll do it without having to enter into the industry, which actually, knowing what I know now, more of what I know about the industry would have finished me off, because I'm just way too soft for what I would have had to deal with in order to have had any modicum of success. The game that you would have had to play, or I would have had to play, would have finished me off way sooner.
And isn't that so interesting? Like when the doors don't open, there's usually a good reason. Like don't try to just shove that door down. You have to sort of respect a closed door and look for the opening somewhere else.
Yeah. So it kind of turned its way around, whereas now it's like, oh, actually, I can see why why that didn't happen. Whereas at the time, and very close, close to it, just me, close to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm not going to do this anymore. There was a huge amount of grieving in terms of this is not, this is, this is why I, moved so far away from my family. This is why I went to the big city. This is why I put myself through years of relentless trying and criticism and rejection and all of those things that very good school in terms of just building up your my own self, in terms of building up my own character, really working out who and what I'm made of, and then me really understanding what creativity is and what it does to you in terms of self-development, like all of the things that you learn when you lean into creativity and your own true authentic creativity is like pretty much any modality that you can go into, which is why then now I'm like, oh, I can see like a very clear connection now that I probably wouldn't have happened upon. Who knows? Like life is a very interesting and very beautiful way of kind of steering you in a different direction. And then when you start to kind of like map it all out, it's like, oh, this makes perfect sense. Didn't at the time.
That's what Viktor Frankl says, right? In that famous book, Man's Search for Meaning. He says you can only understand life backwards. I think there's really something to that. I'm so curious for you, how can you tell when you're in ego versus when you're developing self? What are the cues for you?
Now, well, it just doesn't feel hard, because in the times, and also I don't have any attachment to what anyone really thinks about it, because it's not about what people think anymore. Whereas for a very long time it's like, I wrote this song, do you like it? I did this thing, do you like it? Do you think it's good? Is it good? And also I was asking the opinions of people who were not qualified to give an opinion on the work, because they had no experience or understanding of the process. And even then, when I was working with other musicians or other singers as well, sometimes asking their opinion is not necessarily always good, because we're so fragile around our stuff. We kind of know, it's like having a sibling, their Achilles heel, how to bring them down very quickly. So you don't always ask the people that it comes back from knowing that I've done good work, knowing that I've done the best that I can possibly do at that point, because was it easy? I got to a stage, and I still got to a stage where I could kind of phone it in and it would be good level, because I'd spent so much time doing it that I knew that I could bring out a good level of stuff without too much effort. But where it comes from now, being out of the ego and just being in the soul, is it just kind of feels true to me. And that kind of doesn't really give anyone any real words, but there's just something about it that just feels very calm, that feels very boundless about something that I'm doing, and very clear as well, especially when I have new things to do or get asked to do something else that I didn't plan on. Whereas before I'm like, I need to make it right. I need to make it's just like, okay, what am I going to do? How are we going to do this? Someone's asked me to do this thing. And I just kind of ask a lot of questions. I find that curiosity and asking those who, what, where, how, why questions, and just walking around with not knowing as well. I think being unattached to knowing at any point is a real freedom. And then I know at some point I'll get the prompt, the answer, the idea. I know that if I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm hearing stuff, I'm like, we need to capture this, and writing, and then wake up the next morning and go, oh yeah, that's cool. So I know I've just got a real trust in self now, because it's not dependent on anyone's opinion. It helps if people enjoy it, because I want things to be enjoyable, but it's not dependent on that. And if I know that I've done the best and it's come from the truest place, then that's kind of all that matters. It never used to be like that. It never used to be like that at all. It makes things more peaceful. And there for many years, it was not a peaceful endeavor at all. It was always trying to people pleasing, trying to manipulate, trying to sway, trying to kind of catch on to a trend sometimes as well, especially when I was writing with other people. They were like, oh, like Adele's big now, so can we start to write, things like this? And as a pianist, I could kind of churn out those songs, but it was like, but that's not really who I am. So it was then going back into like, who am I and what do I want to say and what do I want to talk about and what do I want to write about? And those ones, when I go back and I look at those songs over the years, they're the ones that are just very clear journals of where I was at that time, and I didn't, a lot of the time as well, I didn't give myself the credit that I deserved at that time because I was, sending out, and this was before MP3s, sending out jiffy bags of CDs, to record companies and publishing houses, and then counting all the the letters, the letters that came back, and then going back and building it up again. So yeah, I hope that answered what you asked me.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah. What about you? What do you do? Do you have like creative outlets and things that you use to kind of express yourself?
I'm trying to write more lately. As I mentioned, I'm pretty sure my father was autistic, and it was so hard being raised by a single dad who just didn't have that sort of emotional capacity. And I think there's more and more people who have awareness of autism, and especially in children. But those children are going to grow up and have their own families. And I think it might be nice for the world to have this account of what it's like to be the child of someone on the spectrum. So I've been working on writing that, and that feels really good. Writing is such a process, like you definitely don't just like sit down and ta-da, there's your book. So I'm really leaning into process and this idea of the first draft is not anywhere close to what the final draft is going to look like, and that's okay. And that's been fun. That's been a fun expression exercise.
Yeah. Writing is something I've been on and off writing a book for so long, and then I just got tired of myself going, it's coming. So like August is like the end of this month is the deadline. So I've just kind of got into the space of being able to just get it to the flow. I think I was trying to like over perfect it, get it all right. And now it's as well because and also because it's built, or it's kind of a memoir, but also it's in line with the work that I do as well. So it's again going back and looking over moments of my life where magic happened and things steered me and showed me that there was more than just, the physical, and moments of beauty or moments of connection with spirit, and then finding a way of like, how do I write this now in a way that is beautiful, in a way that kind of conveys what I'm trying to share with the reader, so that they understand, so that they can feel it. And longer form writing as well is, me getting into how can I just make sure that you go on a journey with me, but you see it from your point of view, but with my words, which is something I was able to do in songs and kind of get a story out there and get a feeling out there in 3 minutes. But now to write longer pieces that don't get tedious even as well, so it's finding the balance between the two, but it's a fun thing to do. And now I'm kind of at the stage where it's like, I can see the breakdown of it, the plot of it. So yeah, by the end of this month, the first draft in itself will be finished, and then it's like, okay, how am I going to go about kind of releasing this? Am I doing it on myself, or am I working with someone? And one of the things that's great also is because I speak to so many different women and authors on this podcast, I've been able to kind of find out their process. And some have worked with publishers, some have done it on their own, some have done like collaborative things as well. So getting a lot of advice and guidance from their own experience. So, and just also seeing how it's transformed them in terms of themselves, and knowing that their story's out there. And then also, it kind of opens up more interest in yourself from the business point of view. But I would say that, I don't know how it's been for you, it's a real kind of vulnerable share, because at least in a song I can kind of, make metaphors, and it could be this, and maybe it is that, but now it's like I'm actually writing down a literal experience. So there's also that as well. So I can see where there were times where, if we're talking about naming a pain, where I was kind of just like steering away from it, that it was, this is going to open a door to me, like it's going to be out there and going in who knows where's hands, and it's going to be a real big share. Am I ready for that? And going into like, what does it mean to be that vulnerable? But then what does it also mean to not? Because every day it was like, you have to write it, you have to do it, you have to, it has to be done, so I couldn't escape that was reminding me all the time. So yeah, I'm in this kind of like final phase of just like enjoying it and waking up every morning and going, we'll do an hour, and then get it completed and see where it goes. Yeah.
That is so great. Home stretch. Congratulations.
Yeah. Well, it's taken years because it started 2015, 2016 initially.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
This has not been a new this has not been a new thing, but I picked it up again last year, and then it was just that final part of like, okay, we're doing this. This is nearly done. Holding back, pushing back, resisting as well. And I used to get it from clients when I used to do a lot of like websites and things like that, where they had the excuse of not having a business because they didn't have a website. And then once we're about to close on the project, there were like lots of problems with the website. There's not a problem. Like, you don't have the excuse of not having a business because you don't have a website. Not that you need one, but there was always this last bit of, oh, I can't put myself out there. I don't have a thing together. But yeah.
That visibility piece is so hard. I think a lot of people really struggle to take that step to being truly visible to the world.
Yeah. But I'm like, if not now, when, and also not wanting to go out with any regrets of like, yeah, I should have, could have,
Yes.
And it's interesting actually thinking about that whole visibility thing when it came, especially when it came to using social media, that I was like, why am I having such an issue with social media when I'd spent so long trying to be like a singer and trying to be like a really well-known singer, and that isn't that visibility, but there's a difference in it as well. I realized that, especially if I'm sharing on social media or I'm on the podcast, where I could hide a little bit because it's just my voice, that just opening up that way was kind of opening up, like getting me to go, am I ready for this? But then also this desire that I have for true, authentic connection with others is only ever going to come from me being true and authentic, and also relaying that out as well. So it will return itself. Yeah. That's a bit of a share about me. So tell me as well, what's happening in your world? Have you got anything that you want to talk more about, or especially about your program? Speak a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I designed it for the people who can't come see me in San Francisco, but who, meet the avatar, they match the avatar described. People who have this pain, they're very curious about the emotional connection, they're not really sure where to start with it. So the first half of the program is all education. It's 6 weeks of, what is energy? What are emotions? What is pain? How do we understand pain? And the work that folks do are a lot of guided meditations and journaling worksheets to really understand themselves. And ideally, at the end of that 6 weeks, people have some sense of the meaning behind their pain. They've got some starting point, at the very least, of what's going on. And then the second 6 weeks is all about releasing that, because it's one thing to understand it, but it's another thing to get that energy to actually move and get it out of your body. And so the second half is all these different tools and techniques to release energy. So things like toning and emotional freedom technique. We do boundary exercises. We write letters to people and burn them. All these different ways to complete that motion of emotion that got stuck somewhere along the way. And so that the second half, the work is much more like doing these exercises, right? Definitely still some meditating, because I think that is the absolute pillar of, life, but also in a healing journey. I say the 3 pillars in this program are presence, like learning to really be present with yourself, awareness, where you're aware of what it is you're present with, and release, where you let go of anything you're carrying that isn't your true self and not your burden to be taking to the next part of your life.
Great, good for you. And where can everybody find you to sign up to your course and also find you to connect with you on any platform?
Yeah, my website is Courtney Moore Wellness. Moore is my last name with 2 O's, and that's my handle across the board. So Instagram, Facebook, I think LinkedIn, just Courtney Moore Wellness.
Perfect. Courtney, thank you so much for today. I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Courtney, for sharing your wisdom with me, and thank you for listening. Please leave a review and let me know what you're enjoying about her conversations, and in particular, if you've enjoyed the content of this episode, feel free to share with friends who you feel will benefit from the wisdom of my guest. You can find out more about me on my website, that's carolmaywhittick.com, carolmaywhittick.com. I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook under Carol May Whittick, and on Instagram, Casmic, Cazmick. Until the next episode, speak soon. Take care. Bye-bye.